Welcome to Toronto to the 36th annual meeting of the Armenian Bar Association. Our first panel today is on the history of Armenians in Canada. And we have two lifelong learners and educators, Dr. Isabel Kaprielian-Churchill and Raffi Sarkissian. So I'm going to start by asking you, Isabel, what do you see for the future of our community in Canada?
Well, thank you, Bob. And I want to extend my thanks to Bob for organizing this panel and for inviting me to participate. It's always fun to work with Bob. And I consider it a real pleasure and an honor to be here with you this morning. And I want to share some ideas and also some concerns with you. I'd like to preface my remarks. Can you all hear me? No. Can you all hear me now? Okay. Okay, let me preface my remarks by saying that my objective this morning is to raise awareness. But let me begin first by giving you a little bit of background information. I'd like to say a little bit about how the Toronto and Montreal Armenian communities have entrenched their identity. We have churches of various denominations, evangelical, Pentecostal, Catholic, and of course apostolic, both the diocese and the prelacy. We have political, charitable organizations, Scouts for the Young, elderly groups have their seniors groups. We have social aid groups. So in all, we have many different organizations and institutions for our community. We have our cafes and restaurants, and we have members of our community in almost every profession you can mention. And most important of all, we have our schools, both elementary and secondary Armenian language schools. We have created in both Toronto and Montreal what the distinguished Canadian sociologist Raymond Breton termed institutional completeness. If we were to look back over the last 100 years of Armenian settlement in Canada, we see a widespread pattern. The first real settlement in Toronto got underway in the 1920s with the entry of about 100 refugee men and women. At that time, Hamilton had 240 Armenians, and St. Catharines boasted an Armenian population of 310. Meanwhile, Toronto had very few Armenians. Yervan Pastermadjan and Kaprielian-Churchill were the most outstanding two. Relatively few immigrants entered Canada during the 1930s, during the Depression years, and the early 1940s, during the war years. So by the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Armenian community in Toronto was starting to wither and wane somewhat through old age, natural attrition, and intermarriage. Fortunately, in the 1960s, the Canadian government opened its doors to immigration generally and to Armenian immigration. Armenians had been blocked, almost blocked, from entering Canada because they had been classified by Canadian immigration authorities as Asians, therefore undesirable, therefore unwelcome. Now, the same discrimination existed in the United States, where the American government claimed that Armenians were non-whites and therefore ineligible for citizenship. This was dealt with in 1925 by the landmark case of United States versus Kaprielian, where the Armenians actually won that case, and from then on, they were considered white and therefore eligible for naturalization. Meanwhile, in Canada, government authorities steadfastly and stubbornly refused all initiatives by Armenians to change the category. Nevertheless, government attitude toward Armenian immigration changed dramatically during the 1960s, largely due to the lobbying efforts of the Canadian Armenian Congress. These developments led to the blossoming of the Armenian communities in Montreal and Toronto. Concurrently, as conditions in Middle Eastern countries deteriorated and grew dangerous, Armenians fled to the safety of Canada. These push and pull factors continued over the next many decades and into the present. With each movement, the newcomers brought their enthusiasm and vigor, their exuberance, and rejuvenated the community. The latest movement has been from Syria. Syrian Armenians are true dynamism and have reinvigorated our community. These various immigration flows have been vital, a godsend really, to retaining our ethnocultural identity, maintaining our communal survival, and inspiring our Armenian spirit in Canada. Yet, there is cause for disquiet and concern. Depending on immigration movements to sustain our existence as a viable minority raises disturbing questions. What, we may ask, became of the role of the previous immigrants, notably their children born in Canada and their grandchildren? Are these generations still part of the ethnocultural community? Are they involved? And do they participate in the world of their parents and grandparents? In other words, how do we define the status of our community as we move further away from the immigrant generation? Within this scope, let me explore two areas today. One is community structure, and the second is family structure. For community structure, I prepared a demographic study of the Armenian community in the Hamilton. In the 1940s, roughly mid-century, there were about 55 Armenian families in Hamilton. They had 119 children. 11 of those children never married. 50 of those 119 children married Armenians. Of those 50, 19 left Hamilton, usually to join out-of-town spouses. 31 endogamous couples remained in Hamilton, Now that's an important figure, 31. 58 of the 119 children married non-Armenians. And of those, 17 left the city and 41 remained in Hamilton. So we have 31 endogamous and 41 exogamous couples in the city. In a way, the Hamilton community faced a fork in the road. On one direction, they would keep their 31 endogamous families, remain small, and remain pure. The other option was to incorporate the exogamous families, grow, be larger, but also risk dilution. Well, nobody actually decided that it would be this way or that way. It just evolved. And it evolved in the way that the exogamous families were marginalized. I can't say that anybody sidelined them, but they felt sidelined. They felt that they were unwelcome in the community. Consider a friend of mine. She was a member of the Armenian Youth Federation. Her mother was a devoted member of the Armenian Relief Society. My friend married a non-Armenian, and they had 2 sons. Gradually, they stopped coming to Armenian functions. We saw them less and less. And if we had asked her why, she would have said, "It's very hard on my husband. He doesn't understand Armenian, and he comes to these functions and nobody talks to him. He just sits there." And now this is me speaking. I'm sure no one ever went up to him and said, "Hey, Gary, it's good to see you here. Nice to have you. How's business? How's work? Next week, a few of us are going to be playing golf. Would you like to join us?" An Odad he was, and an outsider he remained. Unfortunately, his Armenian wife and 2 sons also stayed away. In Western society, the further we move from the immigrant generation, the more likely we are to encounter exogamy, especially in a small group like ours. We must accept the fact that exogamy is inevitable. Please note, I am not advocating one kind of marriage over another. I'm only giving you the facts. If exogamy is inevitable, then we as a community, as a small community, must deal with it consciously and conscientiously. We must extend a hand to mixed marriage couples and their children and welcome them into our midst. We need to incorporate them into our community, help them feel that they belong, and let them know that they are one of us. Incorporation and connectedness are fundamental to our survival, because we cannot rely on immigration alone for our survival, nor should we depend on immigration indefinitely. You may criticize this approach as being self-serving, and to a certain extent, I suppose it is. But another perspective deserves some thought. In our North American society, it is crucial to belong to something. Family, of course, but also to a group. We must never underestimate communal power and the role of community in our lives. We need friends to share our joy, comfort us during our times of sorrow, and help us during our time of need. In a world dominated by social media, our institutions and organizations offer human contact, linguistic opportunities, and generous support. The friend I mentioned earlier grew old like the rest of us. Her husband died, and her sons placed her in a nursing home. Who visited her? Who took her a bowl of pilaf? Who held her hand and reminisced about the good old days? Who eased her pain with a haidmer? Then one day, one sad day, we read that she had died. In her obituary, these words appeared, and they are etched in my memory. She was proud of her Armenian heritage. Let us never underestimate the value and the depth of communal belonging. Now let's move on to family structure as a mechanism of our survival. Statistics Canada states that Canada's population replacement or fertility rate is 2.1 children per woman of childbearing age, roughly 15 to 44. The actual birth rate in Canada for 2023 was 1.2, considered among the lowest in the Western world. There is no way of easily calculating what the Armenian birth rate is in Canada. But by speaking to a few members of the community and by personal observation, I would guesstimate that the birth rate among Armenians in Toronto today is slightly higher than the national average, perhaps around 1.6, but much lower than the replacement rate of 2.1. This finding is very worrisome. A low birth rate spells trouble for our future. In my view, we are facing a birth rate crisis, and if this trend continues, we will be up against a potential population catastrophe. We all should be mindful of our situation and must try to spread awareness of the replacement shortfall, because I don't think Toronto is the only place that has this low birth rate. Awareness is a first step in recognizing this crisis and in reversing it. And reverse it we must. But how? By creating larger families. Churches and schools are important, but in the end, they are just bricks and mortar. We need to hear the voices of our children ringing in our schools. We need to hear the voices of our elderly in prayers in our churches. We need our people. My stockbroker is an Orthodox Jew. He has 8 children and 4 grandchildren, and he's only 57. Now, I'm not proposing that Armenian families have 8 children. I'm not suggesting that we interfere in the personal and private decision of couples to have as many children as they desire, nor am I trying to make anybody feel guilty or unpatriotic by having small families. The decision is theirs. Our job is not to use a cudgel. Our job is to spread awareness of this problem that we face as a community. If we couple this program of larger families with my earlier conclusion regarding intermarriage incorporation, we will strengthen our community and give hope for future survival. These two initiatives should be embedded in our communal psyche. These two initiatives require community leadership and assistance. It does indeed take a village to raise a child, especially in these difficult economic times. Luckily, our villagers possess the intellectual capacity and the financial resources to back up our young families. Consider, for example, our school. Our community people make donations to the school for scholarships. The school itself gives special privileges to families who have more than two children enrolled in the school. I can hope that our beloved principal here, Raffi Sarkissian, will elaborate further on this. We are a small ethnocultural group in the diaspora. Perhaps 80,000 Armenians in Canada. If we vanish from this diaspora, it is to a great extent by our own doing, because we are, to a certain extent, masters of our own fate. If we want our great-grandchildren to identify themselves as Armenian Canadians or Armenian Americans, even if they are only 25% Armenian, then we as individuals and we as a group have to make concerted, determined, and deliberate effort to take some measure of control over our own destiny for our own survival. Thank you.
So many of us. I guess it's not too much anymore.
No.
No. What everybody here is dying to know is, who is Sarah Corning? What we really would like to tell us about is genocide education, because certainly you have had a leading role in developing the curriculum and presenting it. So tell us about how the Sarah Corning Institute came about and what the curriculum looks like.
All right. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Isabel. It's a pleasure and an honor to share a podium with Isabel, who's been my mentor from a very young age. As she's always encouraged me in everything that I do in community work. So thank you, Isabel, for everything that you do. It's also great to see a lot of alumni from the school here in this room, some of whom were peers of mine, some of them whom were my students, actually. So I take great pride in seeing many of you, and some of you are alumni and also parents. We were at a graduation just last night with Patrick. It was actually a milestone last night for the Toronto Armenian community. We had our largest grade 8 graduating class in the history of our school with 51 kids. So that was a over 45, 46 years of the school in its existence has really shown how the community's investment in the school has paid its dividends with the leadership in the community. So we see how there is a transfer of kind of leadership to the new generation, and many of our organizations are led by the alumni of the school, which is great to see. And it's one of the missions of the school is to prepare leadership for our communities, which is one of the most important things above and beyond the monetary support that people provide, is to have strong leaders to be able to lead the community, and teams of all the volunteers that really drive the community and its development. And that's also kind of speaks testament to the Sarah Corning Center as well. So with regards to the Sarah Corning Center, it was established in 2012 under the umbrella of the Armenian Community Center of Toronto. And the purpose of that was to bring professionals, be it researchers, professional teachers, together to promote genocide education. And this idea was kind of brought forward as a result of many years of hard work by the Armenian National Committee of Toronto to influence the Toronto District School Board to develop a course on genocide, and to incorporate the Armenian Genocide Unit in that course. So this became a grade 11 credit course in the TDSP, and it was first implemented in 2008. So that coincided with me also becoming a teacher. So I graduated that year with my Bachelor of Education. So I was involved in the process of lobbying for and encouraging the TDSP to make the right decision to incorporate that curriculum. Later on, that became my research topic as well for my master's, to ensure that we kind of lock in and really amplify the importance of genocide education, and especially in face of the strong level of denial that exists, in particularly for the Armenians. So in that process of implementing the course, there was a high degree of kind of denial at play that our community and the TDSP was battling against, and that included very aggressive lobbying against that work, with a lot of funds being kind of spilled into that process by the Turkish government as well. So that was a very uphill battle, but a big victory, because that kind of opened doors for later on, which the curriculum that we were involved in as well was the Toronto Catholic School Board fashioning its own genocide curriculum as well, and opened the doors for many schools to teach and adopt that curriculum throughout the province. Now work is being done to ensure that that curriculum is also embedded in the provincial curriculum, making it accessible for schools to be able to apply that curriculum in their schools without concern or challenges. So that's been a very big. One of the things that did also that also did open the doors to, and a lot of the work that we did with research on Canada and Canadians before, during, and after the Armenian genocide, a very important role Canada played during that time. The research kind of led to also the provincial government of Ontario to implement a specific expectation in their Canadian history curriculum. So if you look at the curricula for the Canadian History Unit, the mandatory course, the Grade 10 course, Canada and the Armenians, the relationship between Canada and Armenians is one of the specific expectations in the course. So with regards to the curriculum, so in 2008, when the Toronto District School Board started teaching this course, there was a higher level of demand by teachers to understand the Armenian genocide component a bit more. That component felt a bit more challenging for them because there was generations of professionals who did not know enough about the Armenian genocide because of the lack of the education on the topic. So they were very well versed on the Holocaust. They had already seen and learned quite a bit about Rwanda, which were the two other units of the course. But when it came to the Armenian genocide, and a lot of the complaints that we had was when they were going online, they had mixed information. And so they were finding information that was produced by denialists. And there was a lot of mix of kind of the information that they had. So we planned that we should, get together and start forming this organization so we can visit classrooms, provide free resources, develop more research on the topic, particularly about the connection between Canada and the Armenian genocide, which was the most interesting aspect of the work that we do and one of the most popular topics that we focus on for our students. And since establishing the organization, and let me stress, as I had started, about volunteerism, the importance of volunteerism, the organization is fully run by volunteers. So we are professionals in our daytime lives, and in the evenings and whenever we have free time is the work that we do for the organization. And all the resources and presentations and functions and programming that we provide are all free of charge so the community heavily funds, obviously, our work to make sure that it's free of charge and without barriers for school boards and teachers and students to access. So that's been a very important part of the work that we do, so that when teachers find out that, oh, it's free, and they call us in and they incorporate our work into their programs. So a few things. So we focus on research, obviously. So one of the important works that we did was upon realizing that many families may be getting rid of or not finding the importance of a lot of the archives that they may have in their homes. We did a call out to try to salvage a lot of materials that belong to Armenians that particularly it was the Georgetown boys' families. Sorry, I have slides, but I'm not using them at this point. But so the Georgetown boys were it was a kind of a Canadian first in bringing children from a non-Commonwealth country into Canada. So Canada, with heavy lobbying from Canadians who had been very well aware of what was happening to the Armenians during the genocide, and the Armenian community that was present here today. At that time, Canada was convinced to bring orphaned Armenian children from the genocide from Greece to Ontario, into Georgetown, Ontario. So 109 Armenian boys were brought to the Cedarvale Park, what is currently the Cedarvale Park, and they were housed there in a farm home, and they were educated and raised on this farm. And these 109 boys grew up on this farm. There was a lot of challenges, of course, in that process. First, bringing them here. Canada's intentions were, they called it the noble experiment. As Isabel mentioned, the Armenians were undesirables at that time. So it was a pretty big venture to bring these boys over. But in essence, that noble experiment was that, that try to bring these boys here and work on assimilating them into, Canada. But the goal of those Canadians who wanted to bring them here was to safeguard them from further violence that was occurring towards the end of the Armenian genocide against a lot of the orphanages that existed. And when the boys were brought here, one of the initial acts that the Canadian government took was to assign these boys new names. So they visited the farm and they had either anglicized names or names that were inspired by donors who had funded their arrival. And they started assigning these names to the boys. And according to the stories that we have, one of the youngest boys stood up after a moment of excitement and that novelty of receiving a new name and said that we've lost everything from the genocide, and now you've taken our names, which is all we have left from our families. And at that moment, that Canadian official was so shocked that a boy of that age would be able to think of this. He turned back and requested that the government does not force these names upon the boys. And obviously, Canada not being a multicultural country that it is today, some of these boys adopted those names, particularly their first names, in order to find work later on and kind of integrate into society a bit easier. But they never forgot their original names, of course. And some of these boys became very important figures in the development of the Canadian Armenian communities as well. So when we did the call out, it was particularly to these families who may have had archives in their homes. So these boys, each boy had a file folder and in the Multicultural Society of Ontario archives. Some of them were able to request those files so that they can keep them in their homes. So when you go to the archives today, you'll see folders missing. Those are the folders that those boys had requested and kept. So we were able to kind of salvage 2 of those folders from families. Many other important documents that were about to be kind of thrown out. Some of them had survived floods and basements. A lot of articles that belong to the Georgetown Boys reunion organization as well. It was a reunion that they organized every year. So their banner, their stamp, their letterhead. So all these later on now became primary sources for us to use in the classrooms. So when we visit classrooms, when you organize student conferences, one of the materials that we lay out are these primary sources that the students use to investigate the Armenian history in Canada. So these became very important components of our work. One of the other pieces of recent kind of research-based work that we had done was Daniel Lohanian, who is our research director, did heavy work in salvaging every issue of the Ararat monthly newsletter. So these boys ultimately published one of the first Armenian language newspapers in Canada under the guidance of Aris Alexanian, who was the founder of Alexanian Carpets. So those of you who are from Ontario know Alexanian. It still exists. So he was one of the wealthy Armenians that existed at that time, alongside Levon Babayan. Babayan Foundation is the benefactor of our kindergarten, actually, as well. So Levon Babayan and Aris Alexanian played a very big role in establishing the Armenian Relief Association of Canada, which played a very important part in bringing the boys here. So Daniel was actually able to salvage every single issue, some of which actually he brought in found in Europe, far away from Canada, but we pieced together all the newsletters, translated them. Some articles were in English, some in Armenian. So we translated them into the other language and published that complete collection. So now we're working on using those primary sources, cataloging them in topics that associate with the Canadian curriculum, and making those available to teachers to be able to use in their classrooms when they're talking about immigration and the plight of immigrants and refugees in their classrooms. So this is now a way of incorporating Armenian history into the general curricula of the province. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Armenian education, but just immigrant, refugee, wherever it fits in the law curriculum, business, and humanities. So we're working on developing that material as well, and making it accessible and palatable for students. So alongside with that, the Sarah Courtney Center does free classroom visits to our students and organizes conferences for students. So two of the different conferences we've organized, the annual conferences. One of them is Canada and the Armenian Genocide. It's one of the most recent ones that we did was just on May 28th. So whenever the school is closed, we bring in students from the province into the school so that we can use the facilities to run the conference. So we had over 100 kids just last month coming in from 4 or 5 different high schools. And we did a presentation on Armenian culture. So we did a whole talk on Armenian design, costume, alphabet. They all kind of drew their own Armenian Terchnakir, the first letter of their names, because we had to incorporate obviously some Armenian heritage as well. And we did a whole exhibit. We have a poster exhibit on Canada and the Armenian Genocide and upstanders during the Armenian Genocide. So Canadian heroes who helped Armenians during the genocide in a presentation. The other conference that we had run about 3 times to a total of over 300 students to date is justice and the Armenian Genocide. So it's a complete conference on understanding the components of justice as it relates to reparations, land reparations, monetary reparations, recognition, and punishment, crime and punishment. So these students got a very in-depth understanding of how international legal systems apply to this 100-year-old case, and why that's relevant today and the ongoing genocides that take place as a result of punishment not taking place, right? So it's very inspiring to see these non-Armenian students standing up at the end of the conference and really talking about this information. So by this time, thousands of Canadian Ontario students have been educated by us on the topic of the Armenian Genocide in all its facets. So we have teachers actually who have a year-end assignment in this course where they write letters to the Turkish embassy. So they write letters to the Turkish embassy. Imagine the Turkish embassy receiving hundreds of letters from Ontario students who are demanding the recognition of the Armenian Genocide, who are complaining about denial and its consequences and byproducts. And they always get a kick out of the same sample kind of form letter that they receive, the list of denialist kind of points. So we've had teachers run online campaigns in support of the Armenian Genocide. We've actually had students lobby, media. On one occasion, we were trying to get a response, kind of opinion letter published in the Globe and Mail, which the Globe and Mail was rejecting. And one of the visits I did in the classroom, the students actually wrote about the original opinion article that was written, and they were complaining about how the Globe, during the genocide, played a very important role in raising over $1 million through one of the first North American media campaigns that existed in supporting Armenians during the Armenian Genocide. And they said, how could this same newspaper, 100 years later, publish something that's problematic towards the Armenians? So probably a week, not even a few days later after my visit in that classroom, all of a sudden the editors wrote back and said, well, we want to publish your opinion piece. And then I wrote back to the teacher. I said, did you guys do something? And he's like, yeah, we asked all the students to write a letter to the Globe and Mail. So we had, these advocates. So one of the things I think the successes of the organization is that it has allowed us to share our information, share the correct information, guide them not only in understanding the history, but the current day implications, and also advocacy, which is very important, that we are not alone in our kind of work that we do in towards recognition and justice, that we now have collective commemoration, collective efforts that involve Canadians, non-Armenians, non-Armenian Canadians. So those voices are very important. It's a huge investment. Close to now over a decade of the work that we've been doing has produced, hundreds of Canadians who are now in university or in their professional lives, understanding this history. So it's no longer like now during our generation, you had to always justify and explain and help people understand. And now we have a whole generation of Canadians who already know it, right? So that's, I think, one of the biggest successes of the work that we do through the Corning Center. But it takes a village to be able to function and operate. It takes a very large level of dedicated volunteers and professionals, like many of you in this room, who dedicate your time, aside from the work that you do, to working on community affairs. And I think, as Isabel mentioned, the schools play a very important role in that process. All of the members of the Corning Center are all a product of Armenian private school education, be it alumni or former students. So in whatever cities you are from, it is very important to understand that the schools that exist in those cities, the Armenian schools, are truly the backbone of those communities. So finding any way to be able to support those schools, support the students who are educated in those schools, is, I think, one of the most important work that you are able to do in our lives. This school has played a very important role in preserving Armenian culture, preserving Western Armenian language instruction, and which is one of the things that I think we tend to forget. UNESCO has classified Western Armenian as an endangered language, which means within a few generations it's expected to die out. Our schools are actually, saving and salvaging this language and ensuring that the longevity of that language. So ensuring that we play a role in supporting schools in that process is very important, because that's one of the byproducts of genocide is a loss of identity, and ensuring that these schools continue to play their roles to support the transfer of that language and the use of that language is very important. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry about that. I got carried away. I wasn't using the slides, that's why. So Sarah Corning, our namesake, Sarah was a Canadian nurse. She was from Nova Scotia. There might not be a slide entirely about her, but so Sarah Corning was a Nova Scotian nurse She was most known for her work during the Halifax explosion in saving many lives during that time. She became a Red Cross trained nurse and decided to join missionaries and through the Near East Relief to go to the Ottoman Empire. And she worked with the Armenian communities throughout. She's most known for working in orphanages with orphans who had survived. First in Smyrna, which is today Izmir, and during the Great Fire of Smyrna, she was stationed in Greece. Upon hearing that Smyrna was being burnt down and the Greek and Armenian quarters were now in peril, she actually went into the burning city, knowing that there's an orphanage there that she worked in. She actually saved thousands of Armenian and Greek orphans navigating the fires in Smyrna. And at that time when it was almost impossible to find boats to survive, people were choosing between burning or drowning. She was able to secure boats to transfer these children to Greece. One of the memoirs that we have of her, about her, from a missionary that was with her at that time, said the first time she saw, it was the first time she saw someone use a Bible as a weapon. So apparently Turkish soldiers had come to pull her away and separate the kids from her. And she pulled out a Bible from her coat and started beating down the Turkish soldiers with her Bible. She was a very tall and strong woman. So that helped as well. And one of the things that really inspired us was, number one, at that time, it was very difficult for a female to take a step of that sort, to go to this foreign place with foreign people, with foreign language, and be prepared to help them. And she wasn't actually the only one. There was Catherine Bell Fraser as well, who in her late 20s, very young, ran away from home. Her father and brother did not allow her to take this step, but she joined very early on. This was during the Hamidian massacres. She ended up in the Ottoman Empire and witnessed the massacre of 40,000 Armenians in Van and escaped with them. And while they were escaping, a bullet actually grazed her hair. She became a translator for those who had survived the Hamidian massacres. She later on went throughout United States raising money for the Armenian cause and died of exhaustion at a very young age of 32, 33 years old. And it was because of her neglecting her own health and dedicating her time to helping Armenians. So Sarah Corning returned to Canada eventually, and one of the things that really inspired us is that she was so humble. She never talked about what she did. She had saved thousands of kids. She adopted and funded many of them herself. And she passed away quietly in her hometown of Yarmouth. So one of the things that we have done work around is ensuring that her legacy remains by naming an organization after her. But number two, Canada, well, Ontario and Nova Scotia both have statues of her erected in public spaces. So the first one went up in 2019, thanks to a donor from the community and the partnership that we had with Nova Scotia. And we erected a statue of her in Yarmouth, in her hometown, in the county museum field where her archives are. And a second one was erected in the Forest of Hope in Markham. So in partnership with the city of Markham, we were able to put a sister statue, so the same replica statue of hers there in recognition of her work.
I do want to leave you with one thought. I'm very close to the first time books. My father was one of them. I went to go read against, sometimes reluctantly. And my dad would introduce me to all these boys who I called uncle. And he would say, Bobby, we all came to this country with nothing, and we still have most of it. Thank you very much.